Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Mark O'Kane, who's one of our consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So Mark and I are going to be discussing today the information security management controls out of the organisational controls theme in Annex A of ISO 27001. So Mark, my first question for you is, what are the organisational controls and how do the first 8 A5 controls fit into the overall aim of the organisational controls?
Sure. The organisational controls form part of the Annex A control set that is adopted by ISO 27001 and is very much focused on the governance aspects of information security. So unlike the other Annex A control groups, which focus on securing your HR resources, your facilities, your equipment, and your technology applications, the organisational controls focus on basically the high-level strategic direction of the business when it comes to security. The first 8 A5 controls play a very pivotal role in this. They focus largely on producing of policies, stakeholder engagement, the role that leadership play in the ISMS, bringing how to incorporate best practice into your daily business activities, and how to stay abreast of current and upcoming security threats as well. The first 8 are basically as follows. So the first one is A51, which is about policies for information security. This basically requires the organization to produce an information security policy and a number of supporting policies that go into the more granular detail about what the ISMS requires. These policies have to be approved by management, and they have to be shared with your employees, as well as any other relevant interested parties, such as your contractors or subcontractors that may be doing work for your business. There also has to be a mechanism where people can acknowledge that they formally read and understood the policies that have been provided to them. So then the organization can have that assurance that everyone understands what's expected and knows what their security obligations are. These policies also have to be reviewed at regular intervals, as well as when significant changes occur. So for example, if you have an office security policy, you may review this annually, but if you relocate to another office, that may be a time to review your policy on an ad hoc basis. A52 focuses on roles and responsibilities. So this basically says that any roles or responsibilities relating to the ISMS have to be formally defined, so documented, and allocated based on the needs of the business. So, in practice, this means defining who's responsible for things like managing a security incident, who's responsible for managing your security program in general, what are the obligations on confidentiality for your everyday employee, things like that. A53 focuses on segregation of duties. So if there are any areas in the business which could present a conflict of interest, say, for example, if 2 areas of responsibility could lead to a misuse of data or lead to a risk of fraud or misuse of data, these responsibilities have to be segregated based on the needs of the business as well. A54 focuses largely on the responsibilities of management. So this basically runs down to things like making sure policies are well communicated to employees, making sure that staff under their supervision understand the policies and understand their security requirements in their role. A55 focuses on contact with authorities. So this includes legal or regulatory bodies that your organization might be accountable to, and demonstrating to them that you're complying with any rules that this might require. So this could be legal agencies, regulatory bodies, possibly parent companies, just to give some examples. So you have to maintain regular contact with them. A56 is kind of similar. It focuses on contact with special interest groups. So this basically requires your organization to be in touch with security bodies, security professionals, security associations, according to what you think best, who can offer expert advice on security matters and give insights into new security trends or risks that companies should keep abreast of. Again, it's up to you who you maintain contact with, but this could be, examples could be a professional body or a security association, annual conferences that your organization attends, as long as you're maintaining contact with some special interest groups that can offer security expertise to your organization, then you're basically complying with that control. A57 focuses on threat intelligence. So I personally would say this control is kind of a follow-on to A56 because this requires organizations to gather information about security threats that are out there and apply these to your organization to see whether they can be a threat to you. So this could be threats to companies in general, threats to your particular industry, or it could be threats that are targeting your company in particular. For example, if you realize that there are an increasing number of attack attempts being made against your network in a particular attack vector, then that would be classed as threat intelligence, for example. And then lastly, A58 focuses on information security in project management. So when an organization is engaging in project management activities, this control basically requires that information security good practices should be incorporated into your project work as much as possible.
Amazing.
Really.
Thank you, Mark. Could you tell us about the role that senior leadership and management in general are expected to play in relation to information security and how leadership is linked to the creation of information security policies?
Absolutely. So senior leadership are required to play a very active role in information security with these controls. One of the mistakes that some companies sometimes make is to treat information security like it's something solely for the IT department or for the security team or for a particular individual, rather than it being a company-wide initiative. These controls basically require leadership to set the example and provide the resources that are required to support the ISMS and secure your company's data. Because leadership are the ones who set the standards, and you might say hold the keys to the kingdom when it comes to the resources for the ISMS, leadership are also responsible for defining the security policies of your organization. So again, these policies should specify the basic principles and rules that your users have to comply with and understand with respect to security. So leadership hold the ultimate responsibility for producing those policies, sharing them with people, and making sure that their users understand the requirements of these security policies as well.
And can you talk about how clearly defining roles and responsibilities and applying segregation of duties both help to address information security risks?
Sure. So by defining clear roles and responsibilities, this organizations basically uphold the principle of accountability. So defining these roles and responsibilities ensures that responsibility for your company's data is clearly defined. It also ensures people know what categories of data they are responsible for protecting and how to protect them. So for the average employee, for example, their responsibilities will be to protect confidential information that they're exposed to, not to share it with unauthorized parties. And in terms of how to protect that, an example would be following your classification policy, which states confidentially marked data should not be disclosed with these parties or should be treated in this manner, just to give one example. It also ensures that any activities that the ISMS requires actually are completed and are completed on time by the right people. One thing that often happens is when somebody leaves the business who has a very important role, during the handover process, many of the activities that are involved in get lost. So then this can lead to certain security activities such as policy reviews or risk assessments getting missed or overdue. Another thing that defining roles and responsibilities does is it ensures that people know who to go to for specific tasks or specific functions or for advice on specific areas of security. So for example, if somebody believes they may have encountered an incident, having a defined incident manager, for example, would give them the ability to know who to go to and ask for advice. Is this an incident or is this not an incident? Just to give an example. Segregation of duties is also very important because, as I said before, it ensures that if there are any conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest with certain roles, that these are segregated in order to prevent misuse of data or errors relating to company data use, and it also helps to prevent, the risk of fraud. For example, a good example of this would be if you're working for a software company. It may be necessary to segregate the duty of developing software code from the duty of deploying the code. This would prevent conflict of interest because having that peer review or that management oversight, you might say, would reduce the likelihood of accidentally deploying a vulnerability or accidental disclosure of malicious code that's been inserted if it were an insider threat, for example. So I would say in terms of roles and responsibilities, those are the key reasons why a clear allocation of roles and duties is important. One thing I would mention regarding segregation of duties is some organizations may find it difficult to segregate all roles and responsibilities that could be a conflict of interest. This could be due to the size of the business, especially if the business is quite small and has a small headcount, or if there's not enough resources to support full segregation of all conflicting duties. The only advice I would give to companies that find themselves in that situation would be, if it has to be that any conflicting duties or responsibilities have to be held by one person, then there should be some kind of compensating measures in place to try and reduce the impact or likelihood of such conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mark. You mentioned at the start how the last three controls in that information security management series, how those last three controls talk about maintaining contact with relevant authorities, special interest groups, and threat intelligence sources. How can these controls help organisations to address security risks that may occur as well as incidents that have occurred?
So again, with contact with authorities, I would say that this sits into two camps, really. Authorities that you keep in touch with would include legal or regulatory bodies that you're accountable to and who have rules that you have to comply with. So maintaining contact with these authorities is beneficial because it helps you to keep abreast of any rules or requirements for security that your organization has to comply with. But also authorities can be optional bodies that you go to for expert advice or for support in a particular area. These would be bodies who can give you expert advice if you have a security incident of a particular type, or who can simply offer support in a particular area of security. A good example of this would be your certification body, because they can offer expert advice on how to maintain your ISO 27001 certification and how to comply with the rules of the standard, basically. In terms of special interest groups, maintaining contact with these groups is also very helpful because it helps organizations to have that extra level of support when it comes to security specifically. It means that organizations aren't left to interpret the standard alone or to treat information security as something that's a leap in the dark. Special interest groups, again, can be security bodies or professional associations. So having contact with these can help organizations to keep informed of developments in security risk trends, attack patterns that may be common at a particular time. It gives them access to knowledge and resources from security experts, and allows companies to also gain insight into the types of threats that exist and whether they may be a threat to their business. With respect to threat intelligence, threat intelligence is one of those which it's a control that requires you to gather this information that you've gathered from your special interest groups and use that to decide whether these threats are a concern to your business. This can be done by looking at information from newsletters or email subscriptions, attending security forums or conferences. But there are also a number of threat intelligence tools out there that can provide you with real-time information about the threats to your network or about threats to your industry or to businesses in general. So really, the benefits of these authorities and of threat intelligence is to help companies keep abreast of security threats and be able to address these threats in as quick or as real time as possible.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark. That's a key thing with that threat intelligence one, isn't it? That you can just automate it. You don't have to go out and do the work yourself. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mark. And for anyone that wants to learn a bit more about this topic, we've got a great blog on our website, urmconsulting.com, that Mark's written for us. And that is called ISO 27001-2022 A5 Organisational Controls Information Security Management. So do go and give that a read. And thank you for listening today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.